Barnes Center for Enlisted Education is named after Thomas N. Barnes, the 4th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. Chief Barnes was born in Chester, Pennsylvania to a Baptist minister and his mother, with 4 children that were other siblings. His dad died when he was a teenager, and his mom's primary goal was to make sure that all 5 of her children graduated from high school. In 1949, Chief Barnes decides that he wants to join the United States Navy, and he signs up with several of his friends. But he wakes up one morning and he's completely covered in ice. He had missed his train to join the Navy because he got strep throat and had a fever. Because he missed his train, he went back to the Navy recruiter, and the Navy recruiter told him that it would be at least 6 months before he could join the Navy. So he approaches the Air Force, and the Air Force said that he could go immediately. So he gets on a train from Pennsylvania to Texas, and he ends up at basic military training in 1949 in one of the last segregated BMT units. After he graduates from basic training, which was 13 weeks at the time, he becomes a hydraulics specialist. When he gets to tech school, it's a completely integrated unit. After he graduates tech school, by October of 1950, he's assigned to the 4th Troop Carrier Squadron at McChord Air Force Base in Washington. And he arrives as the first African-American airman assigned to that soon-to-be integrated unit. So within the first year of him being in the United States Air Force, he's experienced a completely segregated unit, a completely integrated unit, and then a unit where he's the first to help integrate the unit. Shortly after he arrives at McChord Air Force Base, he becomes eligible to go TDY, and he gets sent to Japan on a 90-day TDY to fly missions over Korea. That 90-day TDY ends up being 11 months. And during the 11 months, he's working 12-hour shifts as a hydraulics specialist. But on the 12 hours that he's off, he's hanging out with the crew chiefs. And he finally gets enough OJT and flying hours that he qualifies as a flying crew chief. In October of 1971, Chief Barnes was the senior enlisted advisor for ATC, but race riots were really happening all across the Air Force, and probably the most predominant one that we know of is the race riots that happened at Travis Air Force Base that led to the Race Relations Institute being stood up. But at the end of 1971, there was another race riot at Laredo Air Base, and that was in Texas, where African-American airmen had actually taken siege of the dining facility. Security forces was all around the dining facility, and they were ready with bulldozers to actually take down the front of the building when someone said, "Hey, why don't we call Chief Barnes?" Chief Barnes went from San Antonio to Laredo, and he actually climbs in the back window of the dining facility and talked to these African-American airmen. After the event, he said if he had not been called, he really truly felt that airmen probably would have died that day. By the beginning of 1973, he is selected to go to the first pilot class of the Senior NCO Academy. In that class, we saw 120 males and over 42 AFSCs represented. There were 4 SEAs in the class, essentially the equivalent of our command chiefs. And we saw 3 future Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force in that class. Chief Barnes, Chief Parrish, and Chief McCoy all attended that Senior NCO Academy class in 1973. By the end of 1973, Chief Barnes is selected as the 4th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force out of 33 eligible chiefs. He becomes the first African American to serve as an SEA for any of the services, and he also becomes the first Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force to serve more than 2 years. He was actually extended with a new Chief of Staff. He went on to serve until 1977 when he retired as the 4th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. He moved to Texas with his wife and his children, and his most prominent job that he had in retirement was as a cattle rancher. He died in 2003, but his legacy lives on, both in CCAF and Enlisted PME, and that is why the Barnes Center for Enlisted Education was memorialized as the Thomas N. Barnes Center for Enlisted Education.